Most people have been using these words their entire lives without actually knowing what they mean. Depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar, PTSD, ADHD. You've heard all of them, probably used most of them. Maybe a doctor said one to you or about someone you care about. But here's something almost nobody will admit. If you had to describe what any of these actually feels like from the inside, not the definition, not the symptom list, but the real daily experience of living in a brain that has one of these, you probably couldn't do it. And that gap between the word and the experience is where a lot of damage gets done quietly. So here's what we're doing today. We're going into each one. What's happening in the brain? Why the label alone tells you almost nothing about the actual experience, and what it genuinely feels like to live with it. Because once you understand the inside, the word changes completely. Let's start with the one people are most sure they already understand: depression. The assumption most people carry is that it means extreme sadness, and since everyone has been sad, the logic follows: cheer up, think positive, go for a walk, count your blessings. It seems obvious. It is also completely wrong. Sadness has a lot of feeling in it. You ache. You want things to be different. You care deeply that they are. There is actually quite a lot of energy in sadness. Depression is what happens when that signal goes off entirely. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that generates motivation, pleasure, and the basic sense that things matter, shows dramatically reduced activity in people with major depression. The signal that tells you to care about your food, your relationships, your future just goes quiet. Not low, off. So the person isn't refusing to engage, they're sitting in front of things they used to love: a meal, a person, a morning, and there's nothing there. Not sadness about it, just nothing. That distinction is important. They can sleep for 12 hours and wake up exhausted. They can sit in a room full of people who love them and feel completely alone, not because they want to feel that way, but because the chemistry that makes connection feel real isn't running. Telling that person to think positive is genuinely like telling someone with no signal to just make a phone call. The infrastructure isn't there. Depression isn't sadness, it's the absence of feeling, and you can't think your way out of an absence. Anxiety is probably the word that gets misused most casually. People say it when they mean nervous or a little stressed or worried about something coming up. Clinical anxiety disorder is something else. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain has a threat detection system, the amygdala. Its job is to spot danger and fire the alarm. When it goes off, your heart rate jumps, chest tightens, adrenaline floods in, muscles brace. Your body is preparing to fight something or run from something. In anxiety disorder, that system fires when there's nothing there. You're sitting at home, nothing is wrong, and your body is running a full emergency response: heart racing, breathing shallow, this creeping certainty that something terrible is about to happen with no reason for any of it. Put that same person in a grocery store, a meeting, or just trying to sleep, and it's the same thing. The alarm is going off. There's no fire, but the body doesn't know that. It just keeps responding to the signal. You can't simply decide to calm down, any more than you could stand next to a screaming fire alarm and decide to find it peaceful. The problem is the alarm, not the reaction to it. Anxiety disorder isn't excessive worry. It's a body running a full emergency response with no emergency to respond to. ADHD probably gets written off more than any other condition on this list. Needs more discipline. Would focus if she actually tried. Back in my day, we just called that being distracted. It gets treated like a character flaw, a parenting failure, a motivation problem, which is exactly backwards from what's actually going on. ADHD is a dopamine problem. That's it. That's the whole thing. Here's how a typical brain works. You do a task, even a dull one, and the brain releases a small dopamine hit. That's the signal that says, good, keep going. It's what makes sustained effort feel possible even when something isn't interesting. In an ADHD brain, that signal barely fires for routine tasks. The brain gets almost no chemical return for doing something repetitive or boring, so it goes looking for something that actually produces dopamine, something new, something with stakes, something that moves. Not because the person is being difficult, because that's the only fuel available to them. Which is why the same person who genuinely cannot sit still for 10 minutes during something dull can focus for 4 uninterrupted hours on something they find genuinely interesting. The focus isn't missing. The fuel source just has to be the right kind. Put that person under a real deadline with actual consequences, and suddenly the concentration appears because urgency produces dopamine. The brain finally has what it was looking for. ADHD isn't a discipline problem. The brain runs on a different fuel, and most of ordinary life just doesn't produce enough of it. Bipolar disorder has been reduced to a casual adjective. Someone has a rough morning followed by a good afternoon, and people say, "Oh, must be bipolar." It's become almost a throwaway word. What it actually describes is nothing like that. There are 2 distinct neurological states in bipolar disorder, and neither one looks like normal emotion having a bad day. During a manic episode, the brain runs at a speed that feels genuinely extraordinary. 3 hours of sleep and the person wakes completely rested. Ideas come faster than they can speak them. Confidence is absolute, not performed, not forced, but a real total certainty that everything is possible, and they are at their peak. But the judgment systems are also offline during that state, so the person might spend a month's salary in one night, make enormous, irreversible decisions in a few hours, quit their job at 2 a.m., and every single one of those things feels completely rational in the moment. Then the depressive state arrives, the full shutdown, the silence, the absence of feeling, the inability to move, sometimes within the same week as the mania. These aren't moods, they're 2 genuinely different neurological conditions moving through the same person, and the brain's chemistry regulating energy, mood, and thinking is dysregulated in ways that show up clearly on brain imaging. Neither state is a personality, and neither is something the person signed up for. Bipolar disorder isn't dramatic mood swings. It's the brain alternating between 2 completely different neurological states, and the person doesn't get a vote in either one. PTSD has the following mechanics. The standard response to someone with PTSD is some version of, "It happened a long time ago, why can't they just move on?" The reason they can't isn't emotional, it's mechanical, and once you see it, the question stops making sense entirely. Here's what happened to the memory. Normal memories get processed, filed, and tagged as past events. When you remember something from 10 years ago, it feels like a memory, something behind you, already over. Traumatic memories, particularly ones formed under extreme stress, can get stored differently. The brain, overwhelmed at the time, doesn't complete the filing process properly. The memory doesn't get the "this is finished" label. It gets stored as an open file, an active, unresolved threat. So when something triggers it, a sound, a smell, a particular tone of voice, the brain doesn't register it as remembering something frightening. It registers as being in danger right now. Heart rate spikes, muscles tense, adrenaline releases, the identical physiological response to the original event happening years later, because the brain never closed the file. The person isn't being dramatic or choosing to stay stuck. Their nervous system genuinely cannot tell the difference between the memory and the present moment. That's not a mindset issue. It's a filing error in the brain's most basic threat system. PTSD isn't living in the past. The brain stored the event as a current threat, and the body is still responding to it like it's happening right now. OCD has been flattened by pop culture into a personality type. People use it to mean they like things a certain way, tidy, organized, particular. The actual condition has almost nothing to do with any of that. OCD works like this. An unwanted thought arrives, and these thoughts are often deeply disturbing, often completely at odds with who the person actually is and what they value. The brain then treats that thought as a genuine threat and generates intense anxiety around it. To get relief from that anxiety, the person performs a specific behavior, checking the lock, washing hands, counting, repeating something, the compulsion. And the relief is real, it works, for about 10 minutes. Then the anxiety comes back, and the compulsion has to happen again. The brain's error detection circuit is stuck generating false alarms at high intensity over and over. Here's the part most people don't realize. The OCD person almost always knows the behavior doesn't logically fix anything. They know checking the lock 7 times doesn't make it more locked, but without the compulsion, the anxiety becomes genuinely unmanageable. It's not a quirk, it's the only off switch they have access to. OCD isn't about tidiness, it's a brain alarm that won't stop firing, and the compulsion is the only way to briefly silence it. So here's what all of this comes down to. Every condition we just went through has a real, specific physical mechanism. These aren't character flaws, they're not weakness or drama, or people choosing to make things harder. These are brains running particular patterns, and the person inside doesn't get to opt out. Here's the part that actually matters in your life. At some point, maybe right now, someone near you is living inside one of these experiences, and the difference between understanding what's genuinely happening to them versus quietly deciding they just need to try harder, that difference costs something. Connection, trust, the chance to actually see someone before the window closes.